And to Dwayne's point, I'm looking at let's use money in a wise way and save as much as we can.
That's right.
So,
Very good.
Perfect time.
Okay.
okay, done with that. Okay, Courtney.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to Patrice so she can call the roll.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to start with the Finance Committee first. Chairman Chris Parker.
Present.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Present.
Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Present.
Commissioner Alan Younger.
Present.
Okay, and then I'll check for the rest of the commissioners. Chairman Randall Tuttle.
Here.
Oh, he's here. He just made it. Okay. Vice Chair Wesley Curtis.
Present.
Commissioner Harold Day. Commissioner Yvonne Hines. Commissioner Dwayne Long.
Present.
Commissioner Donald Stewart. And Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Present.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patrice. I'll go ahead and introduce our staff that's on the call. So we have Damon DeCane, Assistant City Manager, Patrice Flynn, Senior Administrative Assistant, Mike Quivisto, Deputy Director, Jan McCarg, Assistant Director Solid Waste, Michael Stover, Assistant Director Operations, Shane Chu Huffman, Capital Projects Engineer, Bill Brewer, Water Treatment Superintendent, Ricky Rubio, Business Analyst, Gail Kettler and Howard Boyd, part of the communications team, Lisa Saunders, Chief Financial Officer, Kelly Latham, Deputy Financial Officer, and Heather Curry, Budget Office, and I think that's everyone that's from staff that's on the call. I don't see Marilena. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike. She's going to start with the presentation. Mike, I'm going to share my screen, okay?
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, commission members.
Hey, Michael.
All righty. So today we're going to, Courtney, if you want to go to the next slide. We're going to start with a budget overview. Then Jan McCarg will go through the solid waste capital plan, and then Shang Chu Hoopman will go through the water and wastewater capital plan for us. And we'll start with our budget overview. And we wanted to give you all a kind of a refresher on what our budget timeline looks like. So in January, we have an internal budget kickoff, and we work to start pulling our requests for the upcoming fiscal year, which will be FY22 this year, start pulling those together. In February, we work to formulate all that and send our request to the budget office. We're in March. Today, we're having our first meeting with you all about the capital plan. Then in April, we'll be bringing the operating budget and our rate recommendations to the Finance Committee. That's April 20th. In May, the commission at the regular meeting will recommend the operating and capital budgets to the City Council and adopt rates for the next fiscal year. And just for a point of clarification, the Utility Commission sets the rates and the City Council adopts and appropriates the annual capital and operating budgets. Then in June, typically the City Council adopts and appropriates the funding for the new fiscal year. So that's kind of the overall timeline for the city and the utilities budget process. Today, we're talking about the capital improvement plan, which includes all of the individual capital projects and major studies for the utility in a 6-year planning window. There are two major parts to this. The capital budget is the upcoming year's appropriation for capital items for FY22. In this example down the bottom, you can see in the blue for FY22. That's the request for funding that we're asking for you all to recommend to the city council to appropriate for FY22. And then the remaining years, they're shown in the gray numbers, the gray shaded numbers. That's kind of our capital program, which is a plan for our expenditures that extends 5 years beyond the budget. This kind of shows you what we're anticipating needing to spend as of now in those planning year windows. So this slide shows you how basically our capital projects are funded with two primary sources. We have PAYGO, which is when we pay for these projects with cash, and then we also do some debt financing with bonds and state loans. And PAYGO, just for your information, typically we've been spending in the $20 to $30 million range annually for the past couple of years. So on April 20th, we'll be bringing the operating budget to the Finance Committee, and the operating budget pays for our ongoing expenses for personnel, supplies and services, and our debt service payments, which are basically our mortgage payments on debt we've issued in the past. Those budgets are supported by revenues from fees primarily. On the water and sewer side, it's our volumetric and readiness to serve charges, which funds the majority of those. And then on the landfill side, it's tipping fees for support of the solid waste disposal fund. And so that's kind of a quick overview of our budget process. And if there aren't any questions, I'll turn it over to Lisa Saunders to talk about our debt coverage and debt schedule.
Good afternoon, Commission members. The next couple of slides are just going to talk about our debt service and our total debt, as well as our annual debt service payments that we expect over the next several years. In 2021, we had total debt payments of $51,539,000. Of that, the largest portion was revenue bonds, principal and interest of $33,145,967. We had state loan repayments of $6.8 million, and then equipment lease payments, which is our normal leasing of equipment, of $1,304,000. Our total water and sewer revenue bonds outstanding at December the 31st was $374,520,000. Our state loans that had been approved at the end of the year were $170,959. That's not what's outstanding, but those are the loans that have been approved. That includes the Nielsen loan up to $60 million. We've not officially bringing you the letter to or the amortization schedule for the additional 20 that we were just recently awarded. That would add another 20 to that. For FY21, our outstanding debt on these solid waste bonds were $4.6 million. So we're getting closer and closer to paying that off in the debt service fund. Next slide, please. This is just a reminder of how we calculate our debt coverage ratios. And for anyone that's new to this, when we issue water and sewer revenue bonds, there are certain legal requirements that we have to report to the trustee on the bonds, and those there are a couple different rate covenants, but the one most important one says we have to have at least 1.1 times excess revenue after we pay for our debt service. And ideally, for a AAA rated water utility, we would be better than 2, closer to 3, or even 4 if we compare to our peers. So the way that's calculated is its total operating revenues were $114 million, less expenditures of $46. So we had $67 million in revenues before we paid our debt service. And again, it's just on the revenue bonds that we calculate this. And if you divide the debt service, you get a ratio coverage of 2.03. And this is just historical, what our revenue coverage ratios have looked like. We, back even prior to 2014, we just were over the minimum. So we've done really good in bringing that coverage ratio up. The spike that you see in FY20 is because we are allowed to count conveyances in our debt coverage ratio, but we don't budget conveyances. So that's a non-cash item when a developer conveys those utilities to the utility commission. So if you really just sort of pull a straight line across from 19 to 21, you can see we're just gradually moving up above 2 times the coverage ratio, which is good. We're steadily moving up. And here's just a graph. You've seen this many times. It's all of our revenue bonds that we have outstanding. And it also has some future debt based on the spending that the utilities guys have given me to date. So as of 21, we were right at 40 million. And the blue line are our state, or not our state, our blue line, the light blue line are outstanding revenue bonds and the principal payments over time. The red line is our state loans, and you can see that's where we've really been growing, where we've been accepting state loans. And another note to say, our revenue bonds, we pay those over 30 years, and our state loans, we pay over 20 years. So you get just a little bit larger amount. They're not the same time frame, just a note for that. And then the future debt includes, we're looking at another water and sewer revenue bond, probably late summer to fall. Right now, I have in the projection 65 million. We'll keep monitoring that as we get through this budget cycle. And then it also includes that additional 20 million we talked about before that we have been awarded in a state loan to get us to 80, but we actually haven't signed the promissory note yet, so it's not official. And I think that's it for me, and I'll be glad to ask any questions if you have any.
Lisa, the highest, this is Dwayne, the highest I've seen the debt load, I think, in my tenure on this commission has been about 550 million.
That's correct.
Is that kind of, in your mind, a stopping point for this, for borrowing and spending, or does that have anything to do with it?
No, it does. I do think it's a good number to stay at. One thing that you have to also keep in mind, and we don't really show this anywhere, is that the way the state loans work, they're a draw program. So you're drawing them down, and that's really your outstanding principal. So what I estimate, if you look, we stay in that general range, as Mr. Long is what I'm saying. We're staying at about $500,000, assuming the borrowing we plan on doing in this projection. If that changed, that might be different, but I think that's a good number, and I think we should stay there or under it, frankly. Another note is, as we go forward, I'm looking at inching up the pay-go a little bit in future years rather than doing more borrowings. So I'm really watching it very closely to not borrow any more than we have to.
Off the top of your head, do you know what amounts available for pay-go right now? Just an estimate.
Well, we budgeted in 21, 30 million. We're going to budget in 22, 30 million. And then in 23, I'm looking at 35, and eventually getting to 40. I'm keep trying to push it up. So we're not financing everything that we do.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
So this next slide, we just want to go through a couple of definitions for terminology that we'll use through the presentation. So a budget is an estimate of income and expenditure for a set period of time. Appropriations are setting aside funds for a specific project. And the spend plan is projected capital spending of funds over a 6-year period. And so the next slide here kind of shows you how that ties together. If you look down in the lower left, July 16th or July of 2016, there's a small orange bar there. That's where we appropriated money for an evaluation study. This is an example capital project, and the appropriations and spending that would correlate to that. So in July of 2016, we appropriated money for an evaluation study. You can follow along the green bar is the spending. You get to July of 2017, where we appropriated money for the design of the project. And so over the course of that next year, we spent the design money out. And as you can see, the blue bar there in July of 2018 is what we've already spent. And then the new appropriation on top of that is for the construction and the construction administration of the project, in which you can see we spend out over the course of the next 3.5 years in this example. So this is just kind of we wanted to show you how we appropriate the money. It gets spent out over time, and we need to budget those things out in advance so that we can appropriate them at the appropriate time. And then it gets spent out, and Lisa we try to convey this information to Lisa so that she understands when we need to issue additional debt or what she needs to have available for pay-go for our project. And then this slide here talks about or shows you what we use as the primary drivers for our projects. The first is capacity, when it's necessary to meet our current or future demands of one of our systems. Compliance means it's necessary to meet regulatory and or safety requirements. Condition means that it's necessary to extend the useful life of an asset, and it may include major rehabilitation or replacement of that infrastructure. And then efficiency, we use that when it's necessary to improve a business process, customer service, or something like revenue generation. Any questions on any of that? All right, if not, I'll turn it over to Jan McCard to take a look at the solid waste capital plan.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. So this table shows you an overview of the solid waste capital projects that are active in the 6-year window that we've been talking about. Mike did a good job explaining the formatting, but you see how the budget year 22, the upcoming budget year, is highlighted differently. And I think you'll see that throughout the presentation today. So the 3 projects we'll talk about a little bit more in detail on future slides, but they are the landfill gas system, the facility upgrade project, and the mechanically stabilized earthen retaining wall project. So FY22 budget year requested appropriations are $449,000, and total is $18,347,000. Thanks, Courtney. The first project to talk about is the Haynes Landfill Gas Control System. This is the project that funds the system that collects landfill gas that's generated by waste as it decomposes within the landfill. So there are no budget requests for FY22 upcoming. We have sufficient balance remaining in the project to pay for the work that's ongoing right now. We do anticipate needing appropriations for routine expansions in FY23 and again in FY26. You see $620,000 and $649,000 anticipated to be needed in those years, for a total of $1.269 million in appropriations for that project. I'm happy to take questions as we go, because I was going to move on to another project, but so just let me know if you have anything about that in particular. The next project is the solid waste facility upgrade project. And again, there's no requests needed for FY22. We use this project to fund routine maintenance and repair work, upgrades, that type of thing, to infrastructure at our facilities. So the current work that's underway is the shop renovation. You've heard us talk about that a little bit. It's the white building shown in the picture there, built in the mid-90s and in need of some repair and renovation. The leachate system upgrade project is in the design phase. You'll see these coming to you in the next few months, probably, for approval in a regular agenda item. The appropriation we made last year will fund those, but sorry, Courtney, can you go back quickly? There is a future project that we may request appropriations for, and that would be to make improvements to the entrance, the driveway at Haynes Mill Road landfill. Ncdot has notified us that they're going to widen Haynes Mill Road, so we may need to make improvements subject to how that project works. Total appropriations there are $1,926,000 over the planning period for that project. Thanks, you can go to the next slide. So the final project we were going to talk about today is the mechanically stabilized earthen wall development project. This is a retaining wall that would be constructed around the perimeter of the landfill and would add capacity within roughly the same footprint that we're working in right now that's currently permitted. It would add an estimated 3.8 million additional cubic yards of capacity, which is a pretty significant expansion. We have almost 14 million currently permitted. So almost 4 million additional cubic yards is a pretty significant expansion. And it would extend the life through roughly 2041 based on the current estimates that we've made and as far as the waste acceptance rate. The budget year requested appropriation is $449,000 to continue the design work on that project. It would cover the construction level plans and local government approvals, zoning approvals that we need. The grand total of appropriations over the period is $15,152,000 for that.
Hey, Jan, this is Chris. Where do we stand with the zoning approvals? Have we started working on that?
We have only had preliminary discussions, so there's been no actual submittals made or work done on that.
And you're foreseeing that'll start this coming year?
It would need to be completed within the next 2 years. So yes, I would say yes, we would need to start working on that within the next year.
Okay, thank you.
The picture that you see there is a similar wall to the one that we're talking about, and it's under construction in New Jersey at a landfill up there. Any other questions about that? This aerial photograph shows you the physical layout of where the wall would go. The green dashed line around the southern perimeter of the landfill would be the first phase of the retaining wall. And the pinkish line would be a phase 2 that would be constructed in later years after the horizontal expansion of cells 6 and 7 was completed. So that kind of shows you the physical location of that retaining wall on the ground. I think that's everything we had prepared. Any other questions about those?
Hey, Jane, just for curiosity, seeing the wall with the road attached made me think, so will ours have that? And also, does that allow you, from this perspective, to put waste right up to the left side of the wall, and so it's almost flush with the top?
Yeah, good question. The ramp there looks extremely steep, and I don't think a garbage truck could use a road like that. The road that goes on top of the wall is primarily for maintenance. It's for access and maintenance, as opposed to being an access road for the garbage trucks themselves.
But I guess does the way the wall work, I just started thinking, like for instance, if it was flat ground, we would pile waste up to the level. I mean, does the waste come up to the level of the wall, below or above it, typically?
Not exact, it would be below it. What the wall does is provide a berm that we could extend the base liner from. Courtney, I don't know if you want to, we did have a schematic, and I don't know if it's available to us right now, but we had a physical, there you go. So this picture might help, Mr. Total. It's, this would be a section view of a typical wall, and the light green on the far right would be the existing waste without a wall being built, and there's a baseliner underneath that. The purple shaded area shows you where the structural fill behind the wall would allow that liner to be extended. So then the turquoise is the added capacity.
So it does go up above the wall, but not adjacent to it. It's like a normal landfill. It's
behind it, yes.
Right, exactly.
Yes, that's correct. So you can see how that would add a pretty significant percentage of capacity if you did that all the way around the perimeter of a landfill.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jan was anticipating your question, so she had that slide in there.
Well, engineers really like pictures and diagrams, and it helps explain them.
Architects do too.
Good, I hope it helped.
Jan, is there a height limitation? And that thing is going up in the air pretty good. I'm just curious if we're going to run into some sort of height limitation.
The wall, you're right. The wall itself is as much as 50 feet in places. It varies because of the topography varying underneath it. But the overall height of the waste is not proposed to increase. We could go higher. I mean, physically, it would be possible to take the waste to a higher elevation. But because of the zoning restrictions, at this point, the design does not include an increased height of the waste. We planned it that way just to be sensitive to the visual, the neighbors and what might be visible from the surrounding area.
Good.
Does that help?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're having a great Tuesday afternoon. All right, so the first slide is, here is our summary table containing our budget for FY22 and the next 5 planning years. For FY22, we're requesting appropriations in the amount of $29,800,000 for water distribution and wastewater collection, $43 million for water treatment, and $1 million for wastewater treatment, for a total requested appropriations of $73,800,000. The total anticipated appropriations through FY27 is $408,570,000. So for asset management program, we are requesting appropriations of $1.5 million for FY22. This will help fund the wastewater collection system master plan. So we've started putting our master plans on a 5-year cycle so we can keep them updated regularly. And the next master plan we'll be updating is the wastewater facilities master plan in FY23. The requested appropriations will also help fund the ongoing asset collection inventory project. For collection system improvement program, the collection system improvement program helps us to create a defensible program to help us achieve our goal of reducing our SSOs to less than 2 per 100 miles of sewer. And we are requesting for appropriations of $15 million to help with funding for CSIP year 6, along with Washington Park and West Highland sewer rehab projects that were identified as areas needing rehab from the CSIP. So here is a graph showing the total number of SSOs. So you can see before the program started in 2015, we had 124 SSOs. And then after the program started in 2016, you can kind of see a steady decline. And we're now projecting to close out the year with about 68 SSOs. One of the tasks of the CSIP is to perform condition assessment of our system. We've now covered 21.3%, or about 384 miles of our system. And the red flag repairs are identified based on the condition assessment. And we developed those into projects such as the Washington Park and the West Highlands project. Here you can also see a before and after picture.
How long before you think we're going to get a full condition assessment of all the lines?
Let's see. So we are at year 6, 21%. So somebody who's better at math.
I can jump in there, Mr. Parker. We're steadily, moving forward with, I think it's roughly 30 miles a year, 30 to 40 miles a year, something like that. We've made it through we're in year 5 of the CSIP program, we're starting year 6. The initial RFQ back in 2014 included an option for another 5-year renewal period for the CSIP program. We don't know if we're going to, ask it to do another 5 years total, but we do think that at least 2 or 3 more years is appropriate due to staffing levels and the success of the program. We still haven't achieved our goal of reaching 2 SSOs per 100 miles. But as you can tell, 5 years and 21%, there would still be, several more years of condition assessment, or we would have to increase funding to cover the entire system.
Okay, so as I look out on the screen, we've got $12 million for the next foreseeable future. And you think that'll just continue on for a while?
The drop in from 15 to $12 million indicates the drop in consulting services for CSIP. The $12 million, includes any miscellaneous sewer rehab work, any pipe replacement, any manhole replacement. It's kind of the equivalent on the sewer side to your water distribution system improvements program.
Well, so that's my question. I think, Chris, maybe that's where you're going. Of the 15 million or the 12 million, how much is the CSIP cleaning? And then how much is the capital projects that we discover via the CSIP?
Well, let me clarify. The CSIP is not just cleaning. It's consulting services, condition assessment, staff augmentation. There's several components. Total was roughly $5 million a year.
Okay, so if we take 15, so we're spending $5 million on consulting and cleaning and everything you just said, and then we're forecasting another 10 million in capital projects as a result of doing the CSIP.
Correct.
And then one other question, and this might be at least a county question, or Shang, you can help me, but before the CSIP program, we were cleaning 10% of our system every year, as I recall. Was that an operating budget thing, or was that part of capital projects?
Courtney, you want to answer that? Or you
Yeah. So I think that's a very good question, and that was part of operating. And I will tell you that we want to move the cleaning into our operating budget. Right now, we're cleaning so much that is such a huge increase on our operating budget. And we've rolled it into the CSIP program, but ultimately we want to get that entire cleaning amount, because it is something that would be an operating expense that needs to be moved over onto that side.
Yeah, is there a reason that we would want to? I mean, to me, it is an operating expense, not the sewer rehabilitation projects that we discover as a part of it, but the front half of it, the paying of the contractors and the consultants to do this work feels operating. But is there an optics reason that we don't want to temporarily increase our operating budget and then pull it down once this program's over?
We have looked at it, and we were, correct me, Mike, if I'm wrong, but last year I think we were looking at moving some of the cleaning expenses over to operating, and it's just it's more, the operating budget ends up taking a bigger hit. I mean, it increases it, significantly because of the amount. So we've tried to move some over time. Mike Kay, did you want to, did I misspeak on anything?
No, I think you're spot on, Courtney, and I think to Mr. Tuttle's point, that's a discussion that we need to have over the course of the next year or two, is making sure that we've got our expenses in some of the right buckets, and it may lead to an increase in our operating budget, but that ultimately would lead to a decrease in our capital budget. And if we're paying for some of those same things with cash, it's just how we present it. And
well, that's my second question, Mike. Is that capital? We typically think capital, other than PAYGO, capital we borrow money. And this doesn't feel like this would be a good idea to borrow money for this kind of operating expense kind of program.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed. And we keep that in mind. And we do have those conversations with Lisa about, you know, what do we want to pay for with cash, and what do we want to use our long-term debt for, based on the life expectancy and those types of things associated with those expenses and projects.
And I think, I'll add to that as well. Some of our cleaning has been surge cleaning, so there's been a lot of cleaning up front, and it's not an amount that we'll need. Like, we don't need to. The amount of cleaning that we're doing right now is not going to be something that we're going to sustain, that we're going to have to do every year. So we wouldn't need to transfer all that over to operating. So once we get to a good idea of how much we need to clean every year to keep up with, you know, the maintenance of the system, obviously that will be an operating expense that we want to move over.
Yeah, Chris Parker does a much better job than I do of keeping past years, but I seem to recall that we used to present this as like $5 million for CSIP and $10 million for sewer rehab. And that to me is optically a lot better than lumping it all together, because you've got one that's a cleaning and consulting, as Mike Stover just said, but then the rest of it, sewer rehab, is so clearly capital that, you know, that might be something that I suggest is breaking it up rather than mushing.
Okay.
And Randall, you were going in exactly the right direction that I was planning to do. So thank you for expounding on that, because I was wanting to talk about operations versus capital. So it sounds like that was a worthwhile discussion.
Preemptive. Yeah.
Okay, so I get the feeling Mr. Parker and Mr. Tuttle won't like this slide, but so over 59 million in capital projects are currently in progress as a result of the CSIP program. Here you can see the breakdown of activities and how it makes up the 59 million, but I get what you're saying.
And Mr. Parker, Mr. Tuttle, this is strictly, go back one slide, Courtney, please. This is strictly rehab and replacement work in the sewer system. So you can see the breakdown and evaluation studies, preliminary engineering reports, design, and construction.
Thank you for the PER. I wasn't sure what the PER was. We threw a new acronym.
You're welcome.
LH Basin capacity improvement. This multi-year projects help fund capacity upgrades in this basin as identified in the collection system master plan. This project helps with field verification, I&I reduction support, and construction projects. We don't currently have any major projects identified in the LH Basin, so we are not requesting any appropriations for FY22. Facility improvements, we are requesting appropriations of $300,000 for FY22 to help fund the improvements at our utilities field operations facility. This funding will help with enclosing the open bays in the jet shed area to protect the equipment and increase equipment lifespan. This will also help fund the installation of an emergency generator at UFO. Lift station improvements. We are asking for $750,000 in appropriations to help fund the Abbott's Creek Lift Station PLC upgrade in FY22. Here you can see a picture of Abbott's Creek Lift Station. Any questions so far? Okay. Muddy Creek Basin, similar to the LH Basin, we do not currently have any planned projects identified in this basin, so we are not requesting any appropriations for FY22. Ncdot road widening project, utility relocation. So in accordance with Ncdot policies, we must relocate utilities for Ncdot projects located within their right-of-way. We are requesting appropriations of $2 million to help fund current projects, which includes the Northern Beltway, Eastern Section, and other projects that may be identified throughout the year.
How close are we on estimating this, or have we been in the past?
Well, so, oh, go ahead, Mike.
I'll say, Mr. Parker, this is probably the one we struggle with the most because a lot of it's outside of our control. We have to do an agreement with the state on each project, and we have to have the funds set aside once that agreement's signed. The only problem is we don't pay until the end of the project's completion, which usually could be 2 or 3 years long. If you recall, in the past, we've actually asked for more money, or we projected for more appropriations. And this year we've dropped that number down. I believe we dropped it last year as well, to meet actual demand.
Okay, well, the numbers just look so rounded to me that I was just kind of wondering on that. But you say we do have a 2 or 3 year lead time to know?
2 or 3 year lead time from when you appropriate to when you have to pay for this work. For example,
okay, we have to do the appropriation estimate within the budget earlier, so that's why it's a little harder to tell.
Correct. The state, they do a lot of design build projects, so we have to appropriate the funds and set those aside once we sign the agreement, and then wait until the project's done. They usually send us an invoice for a one-time check, and we cut the check and settle it with the state.
There is a coordination meeting that we have with staff from Ncdot, and as Mike mentioned, it's a little bit harder for us to predict, but they try to give us a schedule of when they think projects will be let and when they'll be under construction. I would say about 2 or 3 years ago, they had a much more aggressive schedule. And so we thought that we were going to be spending a lot, more money than we actually have. And then they slowed down for various reasons. So we just try to stay on top of it, but we do have a coordination meeting with them to try to figure out what all projects that they have coming up.
So I assume, based on the title of this is only state roads. What about city roads?
That's correct. This is only state roads. The city roads get covered under either your water distribution system improvements or your CSIP program through your replacement or rehab work, depending on sewer improvements.
Where did Meadowlark fall?
Meadowlark, that's a city street. That would fall, I think there was some money that came out of CSIP and some that came out of water distribution improvements.
So when y'all make those budget estimates in those categories, you're trying to project what Damon wants us to spend on his projects for the city roads?
That's correct.
Yeah, I take a lot of heat for these things. It's not just me, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you're going to be the ones having to tell us how much we need to allocate for that, and lesser is better.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Okay, so South Fork Basin, similar to Elgin Muddy Basin, this project helps fund capacity upgrades identified in the wastewater collection system master plan. And similar to Elgin Muddy, we don't currently have any planned projects, so we're not asking for any funding for FY22. For the water distribution system improvements, we are asking for $10 million in appropriations for FY22. This will help fund the 15th Street Pump Station facility and electrical upgrades, the water service line renewal, the hydrant replacement project, and the cross connection control inventory and the lead service line inventory. For water tank rehab, we are requesting $250,000 to help fund the water tank rehab program. The Gray Street tank was identified as needing rehab in FY22. Hazen and Sawyer has been retained to continue our tank maintenance program at FY22, and they will be assessing the conditions of the Swan Finished Water Reservoir 1 and 2, Old Town, Stanleyville, and Walkertown tanks. For the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant, so as you remember, Black and Beach came to our February Commission meeting to do a presentation on this plant. So this $40 million that we are requesting to be appropriated will help fully fund construction of the Nielsen plant. We would like to go to bid between May or June, and we'd like to award it in July. Any questions?
Yeah, and just to clarify, that number includes both the construction cost that we would pay the contractor as well as the engineering cost that we would pay Black and Beach or whoever's handling that.
Correct.
Okay, I just want the rest of the commissioners to understand we talked about 108 million and now you're looking at 121. That's where that difference comes from.
Correct. The 108 million is the construction estimate. And so the additional that gets you to 121 million would be for design fees and construction administration fees that would be done by the design engineer, performed by the design engineer. I know this one's, we had a lengthy conversation on this in February, so if you had any other questions, just let us know.
All right, for water treatment, rehab, and upgrades, we are requesting $3 million to help fund the Idols Dam sediment removal and control measures project. The funding will also help with continuing implementation of the AWIA risk and resiliency recommendations that came out of the Water Facilities Master Plan. Biosolids Dry Facility, this multi-year project helps fund the building and equipment maintenance as identified in the Wastewater Facilities Master Plan. For FY22, we are requesting $500,000 to help fund the RTO rebuild, which is the regenerative thermal oxidizer that's used to treat exhaust air. For Elledge Wastewater Treatment Plant rehab and upgrade, we are requesting appropriations of $250,000 to help fund the general building, grounds, and equipment maintenance at the plant. Similar to Elledge, we are requesting $250,000 to help fund equipment maintenance and building and grounds maintenance at the Muddy plant.
Back to the capital versus operating, why are we in a capital plan funding maintenance?
Great question. The break line between operations and capital, if there's a piece of equipment, for example, a pump, is more than $50,000, and we can easily find a pump or a piece of equipment more than $50,000. And the lifespan is expected to last more than 10 years. That's a capital expense.
Sure.
So these two buckets are meant for that type of thing. They're not for cleaning out lagoons. They're not for, your normal day-to-day. They're for replacing equipment and parts that, meet those thresholds. They're,
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, Mike, is that we are going to spend capital dollars for equipment relative to general building and grounds.
Correct.
It's the equipment maintenance that threw me off. That throws me off on this. It looks like we're spending capital dollars for equipment maintenance. I mean, I understand if we rebuild and do a capital repair to equipment, that's just like buying something new. I understand that's capitalized. That's the maintenance caught my eye. That's all.
It's probably more accurate to say equipment replacement than maintenance. We can change that.
Yep.
And finally, nutrient removal. So our current permit doesn't have nutrient limits included. The $5 million in funding for planning year FY24 is there just in case when our permit expires, if the new permit has nutrient limits. But until we see something in writing, we're just keeping this one on the books.
And please remind us when the permit expires.
Our permit is up
June 30th, 2022.
Yep.
And when do they give us a heads up if our discharge limits are affected?
You know, I don't think I don't really have a good answer for that. But I would be surprised if we have limits in our next renewal, permit renewal. We potentially could, and then we would have a period of time where we have, where we have time to implement it. So, if it's in the 22 renewal, then they might say you have 5 years to implement. But there's still so many answers that are questions that are unanswered at this point. And, the committees at the state level, they're still trying to determine what the chlorophyll A standards are going to be. And we continue to work closely with the state on our position about nitrogen and phosphorus limits. So that's still progressing well.
So just to confirm that if our permit is renewed as is, this slide, at least for the next 5 or 6 years, probably goes away.
Yes, we would probably keep it there, but
just slide it way out.
Yeah, we would just keep moving it out. Correct.
Courtney, question, Courtney. We, along with others, we're in this basin-wide committee looking at this whole issue. And we haven't heard anything back from that in a long time. What happened to the committee, and is it still functioning and still dealing with the state, or what's happening?
Yes. So the committee you're talking about is the Yadkin PD River Basin Association. Yes. And we are a member of that association, and we have had a collaborative effort with the state to discuss what we think, our opinion, I guess, based off science, would be if we were to receive nutrient limits. That we think, a phosphorus limit versus a nitrogen limit would be much more beneficial, I guess, to the basin, and more economical. So we have prepared a white paper. The Basin, through a consultant that we hired, we put together a white paper that we submitted with those thoughts and that theory to and presented it to the state, which they have reviewed. But yeah, we're still in we still are in having conversations with the state regarding that topic.
Okay.
And I can definitely put that on the list to bring somebody back to the commission at some point. It's been a while, like you said, since you've had an update, so we can have a guest speaker come to the commission meeting to present on that.
I think that would be helpful because, as the chairman said, if we don't get any limits in the permit coming up, everything moves forward. But at some point, that bunch in Raleigh is going to drop the hammer, and you're talking about a lot of money to deal with those kind of issues. So, I think it is in our benefit to stay on top of dealing with those folks.
Yes, and the staff at the state have been very cooperative, and we've had a good relationship. you know, we are trying to push the phosphorus limit versus the nitrogen. I don't know that they are totally on board with that yet, but yes, it will be something that once we get those limits will be expensive to implement.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so that's the end of our presentation.
So,
and I can share the screen again if you want me to go back to any point, Chairman Parker. But
well, Courtney, what I would ask is maybe when you work on next year's budget, that you do try to break down between that operations versus capital, especially in the CSIP.
Okay.
If we could kind of reach an agreement on that. Did anybody else have any issues that they wanted to talk about with any of the items on this plan?
Well, I sure did, but they answered all the questions. That was really good because I had a list of questions here, and somebody somewhere along the line answered all the questions I had. So you ruined my day.
What I'm hearing you is you would like to make a motion to approve the capital improvement plan for fiscal year 22 to 27 as it's been presented.
I would like to make that motion.
And this is Alan Younger. I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and I think Tom and I are the only ones left to vote then, but we need to do a roll call on that. Patrice?
Yes, I'll go ahead and do the roll call for that.
And this, sorry, Patrice, sorry, this is a motion to recommend approval to the full commission.
Right.
So I'm going to do a motion to recommend full approval to the commission with our finance committee. Chairman Chris Parker.
Yes.
Tom Griffin.
You're muted, Tom.
Yes.
Okay. Hugh Jernigan.
Yes.
And Alan Younger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so motion to move it on to the entire commission passes unanimously. Courtney, do we have any other items for the finance committee?
The only thing else, and I'm looking to Mike Quavista a little bit as well. Obviously, we have our next meeting in April to go over the operating budget and our rate recommendations. And Mike is still working on that with Russ Tellis, who's our financial consultant, and helps us with our rate model, and also working with Lisa Saunders. But I will give you a little bit of a preview. There's a lot of moving parts right now. There's still a lot of questions that we need answers to, but we are going to present two options. One of the options would be what happens if we don't have another year with a rate increase, and how does that impact us in future years? So we could make a decision not to do anything again this year, but it could potentially lead to higher rate increases in future years. And then we will have an option that says, okay, well, if you have a modest rate increase this year, what does that look like in future year? And ultimately, what we want to avoid is having, higher future year rate increases, and definitely not double digits. So we're going to take all that information that we have, and we'll present you with two different options.
So
at that meeting. Go ahead.
Courtney, while we got Lisa and Damon here, I would imagine whatever they determine from this big pot of money that we're getting from the feds could have an impact upon what our budget would be, or in our recommended rate increases. Are we gonna know in time?
No way. We don't even have Treasury guidance yet to tell us what's going to be allowed to spend the money that we're going to get.
And do we feel that the Utility Commission will be a benefactor of any of that?
Well, Lisa, I'll try that one.
Usually,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, the short answer is we don't know. Certainly everything's on the table. There are numerous pots of money that could affect the commission. So the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which has, the ability for overdue utility bills and things like that, is still out there and being implemented. And so we don't know what revenue impacts you're going to see from that. I don't imagine that they'll be substantial, but they will have an impact on your ability to put funds toward fund balance and things like that. The state has the HOPE program. There are other pots of money outside of the money that actually is coming to the county that the commission could benefit from. So there's more than just the 55 million that we're getting, plus I think it's like 70 or so, the 74 or something that the county's getting, that could also benefit the commission. So, but again, the short answer is we're just not going to know. And Lisa hit the nail on the head. Until Treasury gives the states and municipalities some guidance, we're just gonna have to be on standby. And it's not likely that we'll know with enough time for budget. One thing we haven't traditionally done, as the one thing that the commission hasn't traditionally done is a budget amendment. And I think that this year might be a time where that would be an appropriate tool based on what becomes available. And then you could do a budget amendment, after we have some sound knowledge of what's going to happen, that would sort of correct and make those adjustments after the official budget is adopted.
Well, I've got to think that the city, when they're looking at any potential tax increases, or the county as well, because I mean, the bottom line is, are we going to have a rate increase? Are we just we're going to guess? Are we just going to act like we're not getting the money? I mean, how is the city handling that for their own budget?
I'll give that a shot too, Lisa. You can go ahead. You can throw a parachute on the back in a minute. So the Chairman Tuttle. So you have the budget on what you know. And that's out of fairness to the taxpayer and the ratepayer. So if we anticipate funds, or there's a very strong likelihood of funds, then you could probably go ahead and do that. Taxes, this was a valuation year, and I'll speak for my own property. My valuation went up quite a bit. So tax rates, there's the revenue neutral, and then there are others, and you can either raise or lower taxes. And that decision's almost separate from the other funding that's coming in. Now, would it make for good press to get $55 million in 1 year and raise property taxes? Probably not. But I can't speak for the will of the council. But with valuations up and those sorts of things, it's almost apples to oranges looking at rates versus taxes. So you can only budget for what you know, and a budget amendment would allow you to make a mid-course change if we do come into some certainty on what type of funding we'll be receiving. So you do have a safety net.
So that budget amendment, are you saying we would be able to do that prior to June 30th when any rate changes may be going into effect, or are you saying after that?
You could do it after that.
Yeah.
But you would have to you would want to make a rate decision, prior to that. And like the director said, I think let the staff bring the information and present it, and we'll talk about, hopefully by then we'll know a little bit more about the funding. And really what that's going to affect is your capital side of the house, which drives your rates anyway. So we'll need to be focusing on the capital piece. What would be eligible for funding? Will there be funding available to it? And then the potential for revenue on these assistance programs that are separate but tied all to the COVID relief.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Did we have any other questions?
Yeah, I appreciate you, Amy. That was really good, because I was trying to figure out how to make that point. I was thinking I was calling it tangential money, like money that was going to the HOPE program and those type of things, that it would be something, not a great amount, be something to us. And of course, another thing to think about is the possibility of having a stimulus act.
Infrastructure plan.
Yeah. That's another possibility. So we got a lot of little potential balls in the air with that right now, but we don't know what, if, and maybe.
Well, thank you, Hugh, for that. I would like to congratulate Courtney and her team on making it to the Final Four with the Otter Sides Water Station. That's quite exciting. Maybe even more exciting than some of the basketball we've seen in North Carolina lately. So.
That's right. I can't remember who we're up against right now. But yeah, we made it to the Final Four, so it's good PR for the utility and for the city.
From that, so Courtney, let me put you on the spot. When I voted today, they asked me for one word to describe my vote. What word did you use?
Oh, I haven't done it yet, so I didn't know you had to do that.
Well, that was something apparently new. I didn't do that when we went to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, but I didn't have to do that for the other ones.
You think of a word. Damon's already got his word, I'm sure.
He's really good.
My word was awesome. So feel free to use that if you can't think of anything else.
Okay.
Okay. If we don't have any other business before the Finance Committee, then I would take a motion to adjourn.
To be adjourned.
We have a second.
Alan Younger, I'll second.
Do we need to take a vote, Patrice?
Yes. And Finance Committee Chair Chris Parker.
Yes.
Commissioner Tom Griffin.
Let me think. Yes.
Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
I don't need to think. Yes.
Commissioner Alan Younger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.